I competed in one of the craziest special events to date with incredibly skilled drivers, controversies and absolute chaos in the rain. This year's iRacing 24 Hours of Daytona was a race of plot twists and turns. Now let me take you through the story of what was the toughest sim race we've competed in.
And so it's race day for the biggest sim racing event in the world. Welcome along to the top split of the iRacing 24 Hours of Daytona.
When you're racing at a top level, preparations typically start out very early. You know, there are teams that start like 3 weeks before the race and some even start before that. We just encountered a problem pretty early on where some of our typical drivers weren't able to race, which left me and my teammate Alex in a situation where either we could drive a car we didn't really want to, or we could say, fuck it, let's two-man this race and see where it brings us, which is what we chose to do. Now we knew it was going to be super tough, especially because we were going to be in top split, which meant we didn't just have to race, we'd have to perform. We would have to stay super focused, pushing the car to its limits while putting in long hours in the middle of the night. We had signed ourselves up for one of the toughest challenges sim racing can offer, all of this with only 10 days until the race. We were already behind on practice before we even started, so we had to get to work.
We figured out the lineups quite late going into the race. So to maximize our practice time, Marcus did sprint races while I was working on the setup from his feedback.
Well, for these big events, sim races put in a lot of hours. It's an endless grind.
We were getting closer and closer to race day, and it's almost an endless amount of practice because how can you ever know when you're good enough? It always feels like there is just that little bit more than you can find, but sometimes you just have to trust what you have and hope that it might work.
And so it's race day for the biggest sim racing event in the world. This is the moment we've all been waiting for. Welcome along to the top split of the iRacing 24 Hours of Daytona.
It's race day for the 24 Hours of Daytona. I don't think there are many other ways that I would like to spend a weekend. I am so excited to go racing today. Now, let's hope that the race ends up going well. Jumping into qualifying, I wasn't too confident. We had spent more time preparing the race setup as that was more important to us considering the length of the race. Looking back at it, however, I probably should have spent a little bit more time preparing the qualifying.
Yeah, and Marcus starts his flying lap of Daytona, making his way around the banking into the first corner, braking wide. He's had a huge moment of oversteer on the entry. Ooh, what's that going to do for his qualifying?
I made a big mistake in qualifying. You know, I hadn't been practicing it that much, so I wrongly estimated the amount of grip that I had into turn 1. Unfortunately, that meant I lost the rear of the car.
Well, of course not a good lap. Oh well.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
It's a long race.
Yeah.
P17 wasn't the greatest starting position, but we knew that we had to focus on the race as we had a lot of work to do and a long 24 hours in front of us.
This is what it all comes down to. The tension is in the air as the drivers get ready for the day and night that lies ahead of them.
It's quite exciting on the formation lap. Everyone knows that it's about to go down. Personally, I'm not nervous. I think I've taken so many race starts by now that I'm more excited and focused than I am nervous. But I would also have to stay incredibly focused because the race could end at any moment, and it's especially dangerous on the race start, so it's just about remaining calm.
For the 8th time, we're ready to go with eyes to the heaven. It's pedal to the metal, green flag out for the iRacing Daytona 24, powered by VCO. It is Williams Esports to pass that lead and cover off the inside a little bit more effectively from being connecting red line this time right. All 3 of our classes underway, let's not forget.
Well, in the first couple of laps here, it's really about the survival. When the race has settled down a bit more, then you get to work and start making up those positions.
After surviving the first lap of the race, I focused on trying to gain some positions as I knew our race pace was going to be fine. However, in top split, this is not necessarily the easiest of things, so I had to make the moves count. Sending it down the inside of the first corner on lap 3, I managed to gain the first spot of hopefully many. A simple but very effective move as the car ahead had already started fuel saving.
Ooh, the GTPs, they're approaching traffic for the first time. This is going to get super busy as 47 cars fight for the same piece of track.
The first time in traffic is super deadly. When you have so many cars, it's almost inevitable that something will go wrong.
Sensational scenes as these GTPs are trying to navigate this traffic. It is absolute chaos. How they're managing to navigate most of this, I've got no idea.
As we safely made it through the first round of GT3 traffic, you'd think that the race would settle a bit more. But you're wrong. This is top split, so everyone is pretty much flat out all the time. This included the 2 cars ahead of us who decided it was a good idea to have a bit of physical contact, meaning I could slip through and gain 2 positions more, putting us up into P12. Unfortunately, that also put us out of slipstream of the car ahead, which meant I had to start cooking up some fast lap times to catch back up and get into the heat again. So that's what I did.
Yeah, here we go. Second round of traffic coming up now. This time, I'm sure it'll be a bit more spread out, but just as chaotic. These cars are going to be seeing a lot of each other over the next 23.5 hours.
Not only do we have the GT3s to get past, but we're also about to lap the LMP2 cars for the first time, which means all 60 cars will be meeting each other in a similar spot on the track. The focus needs to be on another level to make sure you get through safely and quickly. With races like this, however, that's not always the case. And going on to the 23rd lap of the race, this happened.
Marcus goes to the outside of the GT at the first corner. Ooh, and unfortunately, that ends up in contact.
A close shave, but fortunately we survived. A couple laps later, it was time for me to make my way down the pit lane for the first stop of the race. Full fuel and all 4 tires, so the car was fast and ready for another stint. It wouldn't last long though before another potentially race-ending moment would happen. There are moments in a race like this that make your heart skip a beat. The many hours of work could be wasted in a split second and your race could end on the spot.
Whoa! Oh my god! Well, is there any damage on that car?
Unfortunately, the answer was yes. Despite saving the car from being totally wrecked, I had a bit of netcode contact with one of the LMP2 cars, giving us some front-end damage. I could have avoided the damage if I had seen the crash, but unfortunately it was completely in my blind spot due to the car ahead. This is perhaps one of the most insane moments I've had in sim racing, but I didn't think much about it at the time. I was more focused on what we should do now. The car has sustained aero damage on the front, giving us a significant amount of understeer and costing us around 7/10 of pace every single lap. Should we pit in early to get the damage repaired, costing us an extra stop, or keep going until the end of the stint and try and limit the time loss? We chose the second option, as we had calculated around a 20 to 30 second loss compared to 50 to 60 second loss taking an extra pit stop. Unfortunately though, I was dropping positions, not being able to keep up with anyone, which put us back in P16 once again. I'll be honest, this annoyed me a lot as we were looking at a really good race start where I could have put us up in the top 10, but we now instead fell back right to where we started. But unfortunately, that's racing sometimes. The crash could have been a lot worse and we were still going, so we just had to put our heads down and focus on the race.
First driver changes are here, and for the Apex Racing number 99, Marcus jumps out, and so Alex Gow will take to the steering wheel.
The reality of endurance racing is that it's near impossible to gain time, so you have to focus on limiting damage if you have to, and keeping your head down and staying consistent.
Alex did a good job on the double stint, but something was lurking a couple hours ahead. Something had shown up on the radar and it was not going to be light.
Well, the sun is setting at Daytona. Marcus is lapping quickly here, making up some of the lost time. He's currently running in P13. What's that going to mean when the sun sets and the dark clouds start to take over here at Daytona? Only time will tell.
A small rain cloud was making its way towards the track, and as time passed by, we all realized that this wasn't just going to be a small shower. With heavier clouds starting to show up on the radar, we switched drivers. I really find driving in the wet a fun challenge, and I always enjoy the way that it can mix up a race. But of course, it requires more focus than driving in the dry. Grip and conditions can change every single lap, which makes chaos more likely. It was the calm before the storm, and it would just be a matter of time before the race took a completely different turn.
Let's pull up, I don't know if we can, let's pull up the weather radar. Because guess what? You can see it on your screens.
Oh,
Rain is here, ladies and gentlemen. Rain has arrived at the Daytona International Circuit. The first couple of teams are coming in for the wet tyre. What's going to be the right strategy here? It's a small shower. Is anyone going to be taking the risk and staying out on the dries?
I had to make a quick call on the strategy as we had to pit for our scheduled stop like everyone else. There was just no way the track was wet enough yet, so I did something different to everyone else.
Seems as though the Apex Racing team stays out for dry tyres, despite everyone but Williams changing over to the wets.
Not only had I not taken wet tyres, I didn't even take a new set of dry tyres either. I stayed out on the same slicks as I had run a full stint on now, so that when I left the pits, the tyres would already be up to temperature and I wouldn't have to struggle in damp conditions on a cold, dry tyre. On top of that, I only fueled half a tank to shorten off the pit stop, as I knew there was more heavy rain on the way. Did it pay off? I can assure you it did.
Marcus Saholm is currently the fastest car on track. He's up about 5 to 6 seconds faster than the cars around him.
Marcus was in the zone and made a brilliant strategy call.
He's absolutely flying out there, eating up the competition who was struggling to find grip on those wet tyres. I mean, what could this mean for the Apex Racing team number 99?
Was the pace on the dry tyre going to be enough for us to make up the time we'd lose by making an extra stop? Only time would tell, but with me lapping 6 seconds faster, I made an overtake that put us all the way up in P5 for now. You know, this was not an easy stint. The dry tyres in the damp conditions were super tricky to keep on track. But the fact that a strategy call going against the whole field completely changed our race made this one of my favorite stints I've ever driven. Thinking back on it, I enjoyed it a lot. But I think in the moment itself, I was just focused on keeping the car on track. The race doesn't stop for nobody, and neither did the rain.
Well, heavier rain is approaching the track quite quickly here, and I think we're about to see the last dry runners come in for wet tyres. But that is what is heading this way. Heavier rain, like you've been talking about. It is about to hit the circuit, and it is about to get into very wet weather conditions. Another driver to give a shout out, by the way, you were talking about it, Apex Racing team. They were the other ones to stay on the slick tyres, and I believe it is still Marcus Saholm behind the wheel, up to 5th position.
It was time to change over to the wet tyres as the track had become significantly less grippy. I had timed it perfectly with fuel as I was running on the last lap when the switchover point happened, so I made my way down the pit road for the tyre change. This was the moment we were going to find out how many positions we had gained on the strategy, and as we came out in P9, we knew it had been a good choice. We would also have the advantage on tyres as the others had been overheating them in almost dry conditions. As the stint went on, I'd gained positions as cars in front pitted, were slower or had an accident. First up to P8, then P7, P6 and eventually P5. These were the positions we were fighting for now.
Marcus is gaining positions here with the Williams Esports and Drago Racing finding the barriers. I mean, the Apex Racing team, they're now all the way up in P3.
With the pit stop offsets from all different teams, we were running between P3 and P5 throughout the stint. And as the rain stopped and the track slowly started drying, I jumped out of the car almost 3 hours after I had jumped in. As you can imagine, I needed to rest a bit before my 5-hour monster stint that we had planned later in the night. First though, it was time for Alex to take us through the transition from the wet to the dry.
The grip is crazy when you switch back to the slick tires, they're so much faster. I remember thinking, how are we gonna get back into the pits now that we are on slicks? And that's when the first cars started to crash entering the pits, including Verstappen. So I had the idea to brake on the dry line very early on.
Well, dry line has formed here at Daytona. Teams are on the dry tyres as we're about to pass midnight and head into the late night hours.
Alex did a good job pulling away from 5th and keeping us out of trouble for now, but we were about to enter the late night hours. For the rest of the race, we were going to be at a disadvantage to all of the other 3- and 4-man teams, as we wouldn't be able to get as much rest, unless we planned for long night shifts. I was about to get in the car for a monster 5-hour stint, so Alex could go off and get a couple hours of sleep. This meant that I had to take us from midnight to 5 a.m.
Marcus gets back behind the wheel of the Ferrari 499P at just past midnight.
The track was practically dry on the racing line at this point, which meant everyone was flying.
Another hour gone by and it's still Marcus in that car.
I think when you're driving in the night, you get into your own little bubble. You get into this kind of magical flow as you're just flying around the track.
There's something so special about these night hours, the way time flies by when you're out there pushing the car as fast as you can on a grippy track.
Time really went faster than I had imagined. All of a sudden, I had spent 3 hours in the car when it felt like I had just gotten in.
This is the 6th stint in a row now for Marcus. How long is he going to be able to hold on for?
And all of a sudden, when I approached my 200th lap in a row, I realized how quickly time had gone by. It was almost 5 hours later, and my teammate Alex had woken up ready to get in the car. I think when you're focused and having a good time doing something you love, time just flies by. And that's really one of the things I love most about sim racing. Those nighttime stints where you're in your own world and nothing else matters except the next corner. It's really quite magical.
So it's coming up for 5 a.m. here at Daytona. Marcus dives down onto pit road. I believe this is the end for his 7th stint in a row. And with that, I think it's time that Alex Gow jumps in the car.
A couple laps before we changed drivers, it had once again started raining. This time, the rain was going to last for a while, and it would bring even more drama and controversy than last time the skies had opened. As we passed the 8 hours left mark, the drama would hit the race big time. The leading Ferrari Esports GTP would get caught up in an incident that would be talked about a lot in the sim racing community. Heading into the first horseshoe, the driver outbroke himself, putting him on a trajectory straight towards the barrier where they would have likely sustained damage and lost a heap of time. What actually happened? The moment the driver realized he was heading towards a race-ending moment, he reacted quickly by pressing Alt F4, exiting the game and towing the car back to the pits. Daytona iRacing only takes a couple minutes and it puts you to the end of the lap you're currently on. Instead of spending time in the pits repairing their car, another team member could simply jump in once the tow finished and keep going. Which would have been really smart if towing to gain an advantage wasn't against the spawning code. For us, this meant there was a potential to gain a position on post-race penalties, but to be honest, we couldn't really tell at this point of the race. As for the incident itself, it was an honest mistake. The driver apologized, and I know that he's a good guy. So in my opinion, there's not really anything to discuss here. We just had to keep our heads down and see what would happen.
It's still raining here at Daytona with Max Verstappen currently in the lead of the race, Ferrari Esports second, Grid and Go in P3, and the Apex Racing team running in P4. But still, there's a long time to go in this race and really anything can happen.
One of the biggest challenges was actually the pit entry. It was super wet as it wasn't being constantly driven on and cleared from standing water. Quite a couple of teams were caught up by this throughout the race, which surely set a new record for the most amount of speeding and unsafe pit entry penalties in a top split special event. For us, the pit entry wasn't really a problem. Alex came up with the brilliant idea of braking on the racing line and then turning the car into pit road. Of course, we'd have to make sure the track was clear behind and that if there was anyone, we'd make them aware that they should go to the right as we'd be braking on the racing line. This meant we could brake late and safe to avoid penalties and gain time. As the daylight slowly started making its way above Daytona and the night was coming to an end, Max made a mistake in the early morning hours that unfortunately would have severe consequences.
Max Verstappen's been in the wall somewhere, and Team Redline suddenly are in big trouble here. It's been contact down into the International Horseshoe. We saw him take a big risk only 3 laps ago down the inside of one of the BMWs. Well, he's done it again, and I'm afraid there's been some disastrous consequences this time around.
Verstappen's crash cost them multiple laps, which meant we were now able to move into a podium position with a potential P2 on the line if the post-race penalties were applied to the new leaders, Ferrari Esports. All of this drama happened in the early morning hours at the dawn of a new day. I believe it's because these are the toughest hours of a 24-hour race. When you've raced the whole night and perhaps not slept as much as you normally do, you're tired and it's harder to keep your focus and it's easier to make mistakes. Luckily, I had a teammate who was able to survive through all of this, keeping it on track through the chaos despite the tricky conditions.
Coming into doing a 2-man, I was actually super anxious about how I was gonna handle the lack of sleep, and the biggest difficulty was how the weather was, making the track evolve a lot from one stint to another.
The dawn of a new day has finally arrived here at Daytona. It's no longer dark, which would normally mean it's easier to see something, but since it's still raining, the spray is blinding anyone who's behind another car.
One of the trickiest things about driving in the rain is the visibility. With the spray from cars ahead basically blinding you, it can be tricky to see where there are cars and sometimes even makes it hard to spot the corner you're heading into. You just have to trust your braking points, turning points, and your instincts that you're going where you're actually aiming. After Alex had done a good job keeping the car on track, it was time for me to get back in the car. I had gotten a couple of hours of sleep while Alex pushed through an almost 4-hour stint in the wet, and by the time we changed drivers, it was still raining.
And so 20 hours have gone by, just 4 left to go. After many hours of rain, we're finally starting to see the skies clearing up.
As it stopped raining, a dry line would slowly start to form, but there was no way the track would dry completely before the race finished. At this point, we were just doing single and double stints as we were both very exhausted and tired after a long race. The end was so near. We just had to hold on a tiny bit longer.
It's the final pit stop for the number 99 car as the race finish is getting closer and closer.
I think the final stint is always a joy, whether you've had a good race or not. It's a relief to have made it this far, especially when you're in a good position like we were. Now it was just about taking it easy, minimizing risks, and bringing the car home. The only way we would gain a position was if the car ahead had an accident, and the only way we'd lose one is if we had an accident. Fortunately, none of that happened and we made it through. Going on to the final lap of the race, I started to realize what was happening. We were finishing off the toughest 24-hour race we've ever done. We made it through hours of rain, chaos and drama without making any big mistakes of our own. We had overcome the challenges of only being 2 drivers, and we were going to bring home a podium finish in the biggest sim racing event in the world.
Marcus exits the Le Mans chicane for the final time. I mean, these special events, they give us a larger-than-life feeling. There is only one top split in the 24 Hours of Daytona every 365 days, and everyone is fighting for a good result here. And that's exactly what the 2-driver lineup of the Apex Racing team have managed to do, as Marcus Soholm crosses the line in 3rd place. Is going to be reclassified, though, to P2 due to the disqualification of Ferrari. What a race this has been.
Due to the post-race penalties from the Alta 4 incident, we were able to finish the race in 2nd place. Something we would have never imagined 23 hours earlier. I'm super proud that me and Alex managed to make it through the long and wet night hours, and I'm super thankful to all of you guys. To the people who watched the stream, wished us good luck or congratulated us, and to you right now who made it this far into the video. You're the reason and the foundation to why I keep dedicating my life and spending so much time on this thing called sim racing. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. I've been Marcus, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.